It's 5:30, and I would like to call this meeting of the Urbana Civilian Police Review Board to order. Roll call, please.
Tom Costello.
Here.
Ricardo Diaz. Scott Dossett.
Here.
Diane Gottheil.
Here.
Grace Mitchell. James McNeely.
Here.
Ivy Williams.
Here.
Okay, we do have a quorum. Does anybody have any changes to the agenda? Todd, you want to bring that up, or do you want me to do that?
Sure, I was hoping that maybe we could rearrange the agenda so that we could have the police presentation go first,
Okay.
if that's acceptable to everyone.
Chief Conley's got another appointment. I suspect he's somewhere else in the community this evening, making an appearance, so we'll, that's okay with you. We'd like to let he and Mr. Schlosser go first. Okay. With that, why don't we, well, let me get past the approval of the minutes, and then we'll get going. Approval of the minutes of the previous meeting.
So moved.
Is there a second?
Second.
All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, same sign. Okay, then now, it doesn't appear that we have any public participation. Chief? And by the way, I want to thank you and Mr. Schlosser for being here this evening. I think everybody's familiar with you. Mike, if you want to introduce yourself so we make sure that everybody on the board knows who you are. You and I have some history together,
Yes.
so.
Alrighty, well, good evening, everybody. Last February, the City of Urbana hosted department training entitled Preventing Biased Policing. This program was facilitated by Andre Berry, a nationally recognized police community trainer. We tried something a bit novel during that project because in addition to all the police officers attending, we opened it up to members of the community. In fact, some of you even attended. Mr. Berry was quite complimentary about the direction the department was going, and his department recommendation was that we, the police, continue to engage with community members and create ways to better improve relationships and lines of communication. He also recommended that we continue to engage in annual professional training to keep focused on addressing those goals. As suggested, we followed those recommendations, and I'm happy to report that this year the department has been very successful in fulfilling those goals. Our neighborhood watch groups and associations have expanded, moving from 24 to 33, with several other groups currently in the works. Over the course of the last year, I have also been very involved in a great project over in Champaign. Champaign's Community Coalition was created after the Kewan Carrington shooting, and it was designed to be the community's pathway to build stronger police-community relations. In their words, it was a call to action neighborhood to neighborhood. I can tell you that the project requires attending lots of meetings, participating in neighborhood walks, and engaging in various forms with neighborhood groups. This group provides me with a great deal of feedback on the pulse of the community and helps me to identify areas needed for improvement within our own city. My goal this year is to get the city of Urbana more engaged with that project because it's that good. We also created an Urbana Community Advisory Team comprised of members of the African American community. This team was designed to meet periodically to discuss issues within our community. It also serves as the catalyst to exchange information about current events. One example would be the recent series of shootings that occurred in Champaign, and most recently, just a few nights ago, here in Urbana. The team was called together in Champaign on a Sunday afternoon to discuss strategies and to address the problem. Another example to help illustrate the benefits of the team was about a month ago when several members of our community inquired about a rumor of a police-involved shooting. Somehow a rumor started that an Urbana police officer was involved in a shooting, but that information was quickly corrected and then carried to the others through these team members. By the way, that original call was actually a firefighter who was assaulted by someone walking down the street, and somehow that event evolved into a female being shot by an Urbana police officer. But the reality is this team was notified, they quickly shared the information with other folks, and immediately that information addressed the concerns of the public. That program has been so helpful that in the near future, I plan to develop a similar advisory team with members of the Latino community. So there's going to be more to follow on that in the near future. All right, that was a Reader's Digest version of where we've been at over the past year with respect to the police department and community interactions. I wanted to share that summary to help illustrate our continued efforts to follow one of Andre's recommendations. The other recommendation that Andre made was to continue professional education with our officers. In discussing possible training topics with my leadership team, I was actually a bit surprised by the responses. I was surprised because the suggestions were all over the board. Some suggested dealing and focusing on the mentally ill. We have had a marked increase in the number of cases involving mental illness, and oftentimes the only alternatives, given the limited resources and the training that's available, is to take them to the county jail. Others on the leadership team suggested focusing on the Latino community and addressing some of their needs. Comparing the 2000 to the 2010 census, it clearly indicates a growth in this demographic. The 2000 census identified 179,696 residents in our county. That number grew to 201,081 in 2010. Specifically addressing the Hispanic or Latino population, the 2000 census identified 5,203, and that number doubled to 10,607 in 2010. Someone else actually suggested reaching all of the police department employees by reminding them that we need to demonstrate patience, compassion, and professionalism with everybody we serve. Others heard that suggestion, including me, and almost immediately we simultaneously mentioned the guy I'm about to introduce to you. Dr. Mike Slosher is the director of the Police Training Institute. He also provides a great nationwide training program that was formerly referred to as verbal judo. I don't want to steal any of Mike's thunder, but I can tell you that he's had an incredible concept, and it reminds all of us just how important it is to recognize the needs of each individual that we encounter. Mike was gracious enough to provide training for the entire police department, both police and civilian employees, and he's here tonight to provide you with a short overview of that concept. So without further ado, I'm going to let Mike take the mic.
All right, and since I'm not very good at just sitting still, I convinced them to give me the little microphone, so I'm going to move around a little bit. Are you guys okay with that? Okay, yeah, just a little bit more about me. I'm the director of the Police Training Institute. My PhD studies and all of my research have to do with the intersection of police and race. I study, some of you may have heard of critical race theory, colorblind racial ideology. I also work on research involving conviction of the innocents and things like that. So these are the ideas that we're bringing into our academy to help improve police community relations, especially with racial minority communities, that we will better our training at the police academy, and then of course we will have the connection around the state, and especially locally we'll be able to work with departments on some of this research that I'm doing. But kind of one thing that overall that this training, which used to be called verbal judo, there's some basic concepts. I mean, police work has evolved so much over the years, and it's gotten to the point where we realize that the most important skill a police officer can have is to know how to communicate with people, to know how to treat people with respect. And sometimes that respect has to be regardless of how police are being maybe verbally abused at the time. So we have this little program. It used to be called verbal judo. It's de-escalation, and actually if it's done correctly, it's actually non-escalation, because if you talk to people and work with people the right way, you can keep it from escalating to begin with. And the new name they came up with was verbal defense and influence. So I'm going to go over some of the basic concepts of this. Keep in mind it's a 2-day course at the Police Academy, and we did it in 1 day for a refresher for Urbana Police Department, and I found out through the interaction with the Urbana Police Department as I'm teaching this, it's like teaching it to people that already get it, and that was kind of nice. Brand new recruits, you're trying to really push these concepts, but this is a department that does a lot of these concepts that basically was a review for them. So, and I'm going to try to keep this around, I'm told, 20 minutes. I can have a tendency to be a talker-ten, so if I'm starting to go over, just Give me a little clues, and I'll slow down a little bit. So just real quick, I always like to show this person here. This is Doc Thompson. He was a English professor turned police officer, and he's the one that's kind of started this research. He rode with hundreds of police officers, hundreds, and he found that, you know what? These officers here seem to be able to handle calls and very seldom get into physical confrontations. These officers here, for some reason, seem to get into more physical confrontations. Let's figure out what these people are doing and what they're thinking about versus these, and let's create a program. So he created this based on things that were working for veteran officers that were good at their job. And I like to give credit to him. He passed away a couple years ago, and he was one of my mentors and friends. So I always start with him, even though. Okay, so verbal judo. So the goal of verbal judo is to generate voluntary compliance. We want people to comply with us. We want cooperation. And if it's done correctly, you're even going to get collaboration within the community. So those are the goals of verbal judo or verbal defense and influence, whatever you want to call it. The reason that verbal judo works, the reason that this works, and to think about police officers have so many different cultures, so many different people with different socioeconomic status backgrounds, and everybody's different that we deal with. They're not necessarily like us. But regardless of how different everybody is that we're interacting with, we have these things in common. So we really push what we call the 5 universal truths to young police officers and veteran police officers. And if you think about it, regardless of how different somebody is than me, or how they grew up, or where they grew up, or their background, we know that all people want to be treated with dignity and respect. And that's just a given. So these are the main things that focus on the actual tactics. All people would want to be asked rather than to be told to do something. So the idea in the verbal defense and influence is that we're actually asking people. We're not just telling people to do something. And as soon as you tell somebody or ask somebody to do something, the first thing they're thinking is, why? So we want to explain things to people. We want to tell them why it is we want them to do this and what's going on with that. And people would rather be given options than threats. And last of all people want a second chance. And many people deserve a second chance. So this is kind of the overriding theme of what we consider the 5 universal truths of verbal defense and influence, and that's what influences the rest of the course.
Mike,
Yes, sir.
I see people taking notes. We're wondering, could we get copies of this if we would like?
I can get copies to everybody. I can either email them and I meant to bring.
You give it to.
Yep.
Okay, good.
Could I-
Yeah.
All right, thank you very much.
Yeah, and I taught right till 5 o'clock, and then I thought about that, and then I was working my way over here.
We don't
So.
need it. I mean, as long as we can get it, that's.
Okay, yeah, so everything you see on your screen, I will get everybody a copy of. Yes, sir. Okay, so the goal is to generate voluntary compliance, cooperation, and even collaboration. So the idea that police officers need to keep in mind to stay professional is, you know what, I need to accomplish my goals. So what people are telling me and what they're saying to me and how they're saying it to me doesn't really matter as long as they're complying. I can have somebody that's yelling at me and screaming at me and saying, hey, if you didn't have that gun, I'd beat you up, and all those kinds of things. At the same time, they're turning around and putting their hands behind their back. Is that a cooperative person? Sure, it is. So we understand, that as long as they're cooperating, they can say what they want as long as they do what we ask them to do. And that kind of one of the little sayings in verbal judo, you can have the last word. I'm going to have the last act because I'm going to be able to accomplish what I want to accomplish without it having to get physical. And this is how we interact with people like in an arrest situation. All right, we also talk a lot about respect and empathy. And first of all, we talk about respect and true empathy for people, because we know that even the people that we arrest does not necessarily mean that they're a bad person. Do bad things happen to people? Do people have situations in their lives where things haven't gone right and the police got called? And, so we maybe can have some respect and some empathy for their situation. We don't want to disrespect them. When we disrespect people and we're not being respectful and empathetic, this just increases their anger. So these are simple things that we know through our training as professionals, our behavior. We know that if I started, yelling back at somebody who's angry, that's only going to escalate things. And we have little practice sessions we do, and we do little scenarios and work on these skills. We also know it's important to allow people to save face. And if I'm interacting with somebody, and maybe it's a domestic situation, and the family's there, and I know that I'm mandated to arrest somebody that committed a domestic battery, I'm going to get more cooperation with that person if I treat them with respect and I allow them to save face. That might mean little things like, you know what, sir, why don't we just step outside here, away from your family, away from your kids. I don't want to have to do this in front of your family. We want to allow people to have some self-respect while we're doing these things. So these are things that we will realize that people need to save face. Saving face also might mean if people are in front of their friends and they're yelling and cussing at the police so they can prove to their friends that they're not afraid, that's absolutely fine. They can do that. They're saving face in front of their friends, but they're actually doing what we want. So we are not going to take that personal. And again, these are scenarios that we practice and go through. We also talk about professional face and personal face. And we know that even police officers are human. We know that if people are yelling at me and calling me names and calling my family names and things like that, that I still need to remain professional. I'm not going to take things personal. Okay, so we have to remember who we're representing. So we have a fairly decent-sized block of instruction on talking about who we represent. So for me, if I'm at work as a police officer, I'm representing my police department. I'm representing my community. I'm representing police everywhere in the nation. I'm representing my family. I'm representing myself, and I need to remain professional because I'm representing so much that's so important. And for me, my trick I always did was when I'm on duty and things are getting hostile and I know I want to stay professional, and for me it always worked if I just thought there's my mom standing behind me watching me, and if my mom's watching me, I'm going to stay professional. So, we have to stay professional regardless of the things that are going on and being said to us. So we need to avoid using the language that, that expresses our personal feelings. We need to stay professional. And the thing is, we explain to young recruits, and police officers know this too. If I go in, and to use the domestic as an example again, if I walk into a domestic and the person's yelling at me and I don't want you here, I didn't call you here, they're yelling and cussing at me, are they really mad at me? They're yelling and taking it out on me, but are they really mad at me? No, they're not mad at me. They're mad at the situation. And if I can understand that they're mad at the situation and not really mad at me, I don't have to take it personal. But I'm there, and I'm the authority figure, and I'm the one they're going to take it out on, and that's fine because I know they're not really mad at me. They don't mean the things they're saying to me. And that takes a little bit of practice for our younger recruits. So we have a little saying in verbal judo, if it feels good, don't say it. Because as people have a conflict and they're saying things to the officers, sometimes police officers are so clever, it's like, oh, I could say this back and that would feel really good to say, but we don't want to do that. So if you ask any recruit, anybody that's been through verbal judo, if you just say, if it feels good, I guarantee you they're going to finish that sentence for you. It's going to be, don't say it. So these need to be a habit that needs to be training, and these are the things that get things accomplished without having things escalate to the point where it has to get physical. And most arrests, way over 90% of arrests do not get physical. But those aren't the ones you're going to hear about. You're going to hear about the ones that do. People aren't going to, you're not going to hear on the news, officers went into a violent domestic and things were crazy and the officers were so good at talking there wasn't a fight and they arrested him. That's not going to make the news, right? It's those small ones. So people sometimes have a tendency to think, man, the police, they tasered that person, they hit that person with a stick, or they had to take him down and they hurt him, and that doesn't happen very often. You can look at the statistics. Bureau of Justice has great statistics on this that most people do comply. The other thing we work on, and it's not easy to do, but work on being an active listener. And I think this is inherent to all human beings. I think people aren't good at listening. And you can even test this next time you're sitting around talking to a group of people. You're sitting around, in a break room with your friends or whatever, and you're talking, and they're talking, and then are you really listening to them? Or as soon as they said something, you start thinking of what you're going to say when it's your turn to talk. So we stop listening to them because it's my turn to talk. They're talking about, hey, did you see that Cubs game last night? And I'm thinking, getting ready to talk about, yeah, did you see Rizzo? And so, I'm not listening. It's inherent. So it takes practice to become an active listener, because then we can truly find out what the problem is, and we're more likely to be able to help them if we can sift through, pay attention, be an active listener, be patient, and listen to what people are trying to tell us. So that's very important if we're going to help find a solution, and that does take practice for everybody. Also, it's inherent for people when somebody walks into a violent situation and people are arguing and screaming. It's just, it seems like the first thing you want to do is walk in and say, hey, calm down, calm down. And that usually does the opposite effect, because people that are in a situation where they're angry about something believe they're as calm as they should be. And if you tell somebody to be calm, they're going to say, I am calm, and then it builds and builds and builds. So we have phrases that we practice not saying. So these are our anti-peace phrases. What's your problem? Okay, that's not a nice, would you guys like me to say that to you? What's your problem? Of course not. You people, no matter how it's met. Is that an obvious one, everybody? I don't have to get into that, right? We good on that? Okay. How about just come over here? How about, sir, can you step over here? I'd like to chat with you a few minutes. I think I can help you out. Let's see if we can get this situation resolved. And then I'm not going to tell you again, because those are the rules. But maybe some of you say those to your kids. That might be a different context, okay? All right, it's none of your business. Why don't you just be reasonable? If I told somebody that, do you think that they're not reasonable? Is there anybody that personally thinks they're not being reasonable? Probably not, okay? Or you wouldn't understand. If I told somebody, if they're asking me why I'm doing this, and I said, well, you wouldn't understand, what am I telling them? Yeah, you're dumb. You're not very smart, so I'm not going to say that. And how about, what do you want me to do about it? Would you like a police officer to say that? No, we're there to help. So we need to be respectful. We need to be empathetic. We're there to help people. This person calling the police might be their one contact with us, and we want to show that professional image. We want to leave them with, wow, I'm really proud of my police department. I'm really proud of the Urbana Police Department. I had a great contact with them. They were very empathetic. They helped me the best they could. So these are our things we don't say. So we practice saying things, and this is an important part of verbal judo. We practice saying things called deflection phrases. So if somebody's yelling and screaming, and I'll stick with the domestic since that's in my head now. Knock on the door, and the guy opens the door, and he's yelling, or the female opens the door and yelling, I didn't call the police, you get out of my house, and I could just say, no, you need to let me in right now. That probably is not a good idea. But if I can use deflection phrases, okay, sir, I can see you're upset, and I can appreciate that, but, the fact is I was called here, and I can't leave until I make sure everybody's okay. Would it be all right if I just step in and talk to you for a few minutes? I'll be out of here a lot sooner if I can find out what's going on. So these deflection phrases, instead of calm down, shut up, sit down over there, I can see you're upset, I can appreciate that. I would probably be too if the police were called to my house. These types of things, show that empathy and show that respect to the person. And they're so simple to use. And these are just a list of some. People can think of their own ways of deflecting things rather than yelling or just being so aggressive toward people, deflecting and understanding. So this is a key thing that's also practiced in the role playing. Okay? And if you guys have any questions, you can let me know. I'm right here to answer. And we also have tactical peace phrases. And this is something maybe we all learned as children from our parents, but they still work even in police work. Okay, excuse me, sir, I'd like to talk to you. What can I do to help? Okay, can I ask you to, can I just maybe get your ID from you and talk to you a few minutes? I'll have you out of here as soon as I can, but this is some information I need to get, and once I get it, we'll get through this, and then I'll have you on your way a lot sooner. So, would you assist me with this? Because I think I can help you, but I'm going to need your help too. All right, can you work with me on this? And I appreciate your understanding. So it's what you say, it's tone of voice, it's how you say it, and you would be surprised. I use these tactics for my 20 years in police work, and the reason I love teaching is because I know it works. I know by showing this respect and empathy and being and having these phrases that I use and these little tactics that I'm going to get that cooperation, or I'm much more likely to get cooperation. All right, but we also have certain steps, and you know, these things, this right here would be like a half an hour presentation on the steps, but let me just explain it briefly if I can. Okay, so we have what's called the 5 steps. If somebody is not complying with me, we have ways that to get them to comply with us by treating them right, and that's what these steps are. So if I have somebody that I want to do something, you know, let's say there's somebody sitting in a car and I have a warrant for their arrest and I need them to step out of the car because there's a warrant for their arrest and I have to do my job. So am I going to tell them, hey, get out of the car, you're under arrest, you got a warrant? Of course not. I want compliance. Sir, I'm going to ask you to step out of the car. But I'm not going to stop there because their first thing is, whoa, 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 why am I stepping out of the car? And we're going to be honest with people. We don't have to make stuff up. They probably know there's a warrant. Sir, I'm going to ask you to step out of the car, you know, ran your name, found out you had a minor warrant. Apparently you forgot to appear in court on this. It's not that big a deal. If you don't mind stepping out of the car, we can get this taken care of today. That's the ask and telling why you want them to step out of the car. If they're still refusing, we give them some options. And we'll make it their decision, good options and bad options. Sir, if you step out of the car, we can take care of this. You can call somebody for bond. It's not all that big of a deal. It's a minor warrant. We can take care of it. Unfortunately, if you don't step out of the car, we could have some additional charges, right? We could have resisting arrest. If we end up fighting, that could be a felony for aggravated battery to a police officer. You'd have to spend the night in jail. You're trying to set context of, you know, this would be good for you and good for me. You know, and then we're always on their side. I'd like to hope you'd cooperate with me because, you know, we can take care of this so much easier. And it takes a little bit of patience. We don't have to set context, present options, and then if that doesn't work, pull them out of the car. You know, we can start conversations with them. So, you know, the next step, if they're absolutely refusing to get out of the car, you know, we're going to say something to the effect of, sir, is there anything I can say to gain your cooperation? I'd really like to think so. And they may say something like, now, well, okay, wait a minute. How much did you say my bond was? And then we can just work our way back through the steps. We can be patient, and we can get our goal accomplished. And if all of that fails, we are going to have to act. We've tried everything. So then it would be time to act, which might mean call for backup. And so you have the principle of mass, so you're less likely to hurt them, and we can get them out of the car and place them under arrest, hopefully with very little resistance. And this can work in lots of scenarios, so that just seemed like a fairly easy one to explain. Everybody kind of understand how these steps work, and they're practiced over and over and over. So police officers get really good at these. And it's always nice when we approach somebody to introduce ourselves. We always introduce ourselves. You know, hi, I'm Officer Schlosser with the Urbana Police Department. The reason I'm here today is I need to talk to you about. If I'm professional, you know, and I introduce myself, I tell them my position, you know, and maybe take them aside if they're around their friends and stuff. So the approach is important, and then we go into the 5-step and trying to figure out how we can get this person to comply with as little resistance as possible, and hopefully none. And way over 90% of people comply. It just doesn't make the news. All right, so knowing when it's time to stop talking, you know, I mean, there's going to be times where you're not going to just ask and set context. I mean, if there's a high-risk situation, you know, and somebody pulls out a knife and they're running at you, you're not going to say, sir, I'm going to ask you to not stab me. Yeah, I mean, you know, you're going to have to act. You're going to have to do something. It becomes a high-risk situation. So there's times where you just have to go right to act. We know that. Most situations don't get there, though. And that other stuff has to do with groups that I teach that are non-police, so don't worry about that. And these are just our examples of when it's time to act. If I'm going through my steps and I'm talking to people and I'm doing my best communication skills possible and I'm being very professional and empathetic and realizing that it's my job to help this person think like they might think for themselves 24 to 48 hours later, because later they're going to think, I'm glad that officer talked to me and helped me be reasonable, because now that I think back on it, I could have been in a lot more trouble. It's my job to help think for them like they're probably going to think for themselves later. Because people we deal with are in that bad situation at that time, but that doesn't mean that they're bad, awful people. But everybody has things that happen in their lives, and we need to keep that in mind. Not everybody that gets arrested is an awful bad person. It's just a time in their life when something happened, and we need to be able to help them think for themselves like they would a little bit later when they're probably more reasonable. But, you know, if you're in jeopardy of, you know, somebody's in jeopardy or you're under attack or somebody runs from me, these are the kinds of things that it's time to go ahead and act. Kind of common sense, I think. All right, we have something called the Tactical 8-Step. And when I trained the Urbana Police Department, one of the things that I was excited about, and I kind of already knew this, but I wasn't 100% sure, we have an 8-step person contact, we have an 8-step vehicle stop. And, you know, I'm talking to some of my buddies on the Urbana Police Department, and they said, well, yeah, Mike, we do the 8-step every single time. In fact, I know our chief and administrators are going to be pulling things from our vehicles, our cameras on our traffic stops periodically and making sure we're doing what we're supposed to be doing, that we're professional, because these are set up so that you stay professional. These things get to be a habit. When I meet somebody, good afternoon, I'm Officer Schlosser with the Urbana Police Department. The reason I need to talk to you today is, we've had a lot of burglaries in this area, and somebody called and saw you here. I just want to make sure everything's okay. Can I get some identification from you? Talk to them about what they're doing there and things like that. So, I mean, these are steps that help you stay professional and learn what's going on at the same time. It's the same thing with the 8-step traffic stop. And, you know, it is so nice to know that police officers are not going up and making up new things every time they talk to somebody. You know, hey, Sparky, where's the fire? That's not a good thing to say, by the way. You know, we're actually, you know, we've evolved into this profession where we have things that have become habits for us so that we know we're continually treating people with respect. We know we're doing things according to policy. And we know that we're going to be held accountable by our chief because they're going to be keeping an eye on me and pulling these videos for my traffic stops and other incidents. So, you know, good afternoon. I'm Officer Schlosser with the Urbana Police Department. The reason I stopped you today is I clocked you at 40 in a 30-mile-per-hour zone. Is there any justification for that? And might there be a justification for it? Might I have police discretion? Might somebody be going to the hospital? Might there be a lady in the back seat in labor, crowning? Is that a reason maybe that the husband's driving fast? And so do I have the discretion? Am I going to make him stay there and write him a ticket? No, I'm probably going to get him to the hospital, maybe even call an ambulance. I mean, we have police discretion on what we do, and police discretion is important. We're going to ask for their driver's license. That's the next thing. We're going to ask for, you know, insurance, and then we're going to be polite for them. Sir, you know, I'm going to go back to my vehicle. I'm going to evaluate this information. If I were to issue you a ticket, you know, how would you like to post bond? These are your options. Talk to them about that. You go back to your vehicle, ticket, warning ticket, whatever. Come back up, explain it to them. Sir, I appreciate your cooperation. When I get back to my squad car, I'm going to turn off my spotlight. When you see the spotlight go off, it's safe for you to drive out into traffic. That's a habit. I mean, they've done it so many times, over and over and over. So all these concepts, combined with the tactics, and understanding why people are angry and argumentative, and it's not me that they're really mad at, and through my training I've learned that they're not really mad at me, so I'm not going to take anything personal. I can stay professional. And I think that's what's so important, and I think that has how our police across the country has evolved. The verbal judo or verbal defense and influence really hit off big, probably about February of 1991. Does anybody know what that occasion was in 91 and then some riots in 92? Okay, so it's like, you know, there's this huge evaluation and commissioner's report on LAPD, what not to do. And so that helped other departments across the nation realize this is the police culture we want to get rid of. This is the police culture that we want that has to do with the police and the community working together and police staying professional. And knowing that at times, yes, somebody I'm going to have to scuffle with, somebody's going to resist, no matter how good I am at talking to people, those things happen. But not very often, especially if we train our officers to learn how to talk to people, have some common sense, and have some discretion in their job. So, this is a fairly lengthy class, but I think in a nutshell, that's kind of what we're teaching recruits. We're going around and teaching police officers. We're going around, tomorrow I'm teaching the Academic Human Resources Department at the U of I. Tomorrow afternoon I have a security group and student patrol group. And I've taught over 1,000 people since last July on these concepts in these classes, practice scenarios, find out how these things apply to their work, and I'm getting good feedback from it, and people are finding that, gosh, I guess I just didn't realize these things, and they're not too hard with a little practice. And police officers are the best at it. And if you have police officers that aren't good at it, that's where the discipline comes in, and that's where the chief's job comes in. So I think that might have been about it, but I think I always probably, little quote I love, we treat people like ladies and gentlemen, not necessarily because they are, but because we are. So when I go to work, I represent all those things I said I represent. I am a gentleman, and I'm going to treat people like ladies and gentlemen. That's my job, regardless of the whatever conflicts I'm having. I am a professional, and those things are so important. And I always start and I finish, and I usually talk about this a lot more in my longer classes, and I know I'm probably getting close on the end of my time. I think this is my last slide, but I want to read this again, and I always read it at the beginning and the end because I think this is so important. Everybody is different backgrounds, different cultures, and I think that regardless of all those differences, this applies to everybody. Everybody, all people want to be treated with dignity and respect. All people want to be asked rather than told. All people want to be told why they are being asked, because that's the first thing they're thinking. All people want to be given options rather than threats, and all people want a second chance, and many deserve a second chance. And we know that as police officers. And we know that that's what's going to help the community in the long run. And I think that was my last slide. So I will take questions.
Thank you.
Okay.
Chief, thank you. Does anybody have any questions?
Yes, sir.
Foreign language speakers
Mm-hmm.
are, a special case that I thought of as you were beginning your talk. Certainly you can probably bone up on a couple of languages and know a couple of introductory
Yeah.
phrases, but in a community like Champaign-Urbana, there may be, 5, 6 languages that you have to cover. Do we have any kind of backup like that in the event that
Well,
there's...
we are lucky in this area to have, and correct me if I'm wrong, we have the University of Illinois that has so many interpreters with so many different languages. We also have a kind of a shorter class on, for the Spanish-speaking community, but I think that having those resources available and knowing how to get a hold of them, and the chiefs and the sheriff have meetings every month, and everybody is on the same page, and they're saying, hey, these are my contacts if this happens, these are my contacts if this happens. I see them sharing things. So we have access to, or those guys have access to that. Am I correct on that?
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Right. We also have we have several,
Officers.
fortunately, very talented police officers who have the ability to teach really well. Adam Chacon is an example.
He teaches at our
Presents
institute.
not only at the Police Training Institute, but to every police officer in Champaign County and throughout the country to help deal with those language barriers. And we have police officers from Champaign and the county, and we share those resources because everybody doesn't have that same ability.
Do you track the successfulness of this program at all?
Yeah, I don't know if there's, anecdotally I do.
Right.
I have so many recruits after they leave emailing me back, hey, Dr. Schlosser, you know, I did this on my traffic stop, or I used these deflection phrases, and they're all excited that this stuff is working for them. So, but as far as like any empirical research with, you know, statistics and putting them into SPSS stuff and all that complicated stuff, I don't have anything like that. But, you know, I think that, you know, it's kind of nice if people, and you guys have probably done some ride-alongs maybe, and you to listen to, you're thinking, man, this is a very hostile situation, and this police officer's getting out of the car, and it looks like it could be really, really violent. And the police officer walks out, and he is so calm and just starts talking to the people, and it's amazing, you know, especially the more experienced an officer gets, how good they get at talking to people. And, you know, I try to ride along with different people from time to time and see how it's going. But Dr. George Thompson has some books out, but I don't know that he actually has. All of his are anecdotal. So maybe that's another research project I should take up on. I've got a couple going right now, but
I had a question on your steps.
yeah.
And I'm assuming you do role-playing involved, that's what you're doing. Where do people generally stub their toe when they're, as they're just learning this?
As they're just learning?
Yeah, where do they and there's got to
Yeah.
be something that just,
Yep. Well, we have excellent role players, and there's certain scenarios where their job is to try to get to the person so they take things personal. And we find that sometimes early on in the training with recruits, they go into a domestic with two role players screaming and hollering at each other, and the first thing they say, and there's their friends are sitting over there, and maybe me as the facilitator, and they'll say, hey, calm down. And they realize it right away, and they look over at me and they go, oops. And then the role players are assigned, or they understand that, okay, get angrier for a little bit, but then allow that person to realize they did that wrong and start going through some of these concepts and some of the steps. But it's just, you know, they're nervous about things to start with. But we go through so many scenarios, I mean, dozens and dozens throughout the 12 weeks. By the time they get to the end, you know, there's, sir, I can see you're upset, and I can appreciate that, but, you know, really, if you just step over here and talk to me for a few minutes, I'm going to have you on your way. It doesn't appear like it's that big of a deal, and we can get this resolved. So, I mean, it's just, it starts to get to be a habit. And I tell them after the first day of verbal judo, I said, I want you guys, when you go over to Bromley Hall to eat, to argue with each other and practice deflection phrases and things like that, but not too loud to get kicked out.
Jello again. I understand how you feel.
Yes,
Am I
ma'am.
right in thinking that along with the verbal, you also need to have your body language in tune with what you're saying also?
Absolutely.
Because I think people can see you saying
Yeah.
one thing, but your body
Yeah.
is
Yeah.
not with the words.
Like, yeah, I can appreciate what you're saying. I understand that. Right?
I think
Or,
that's-
you know, but it's still strategic for me. We teach every officer to stand and talk to anybody with their hands up and weapon side back as a habit. I don't care if it's just a victim of a stolen bike. This needs to be a habit. But I can do this in such a way where I'm empathetic. You know, I understand what you're saying, and I can, you know, my tone of voice is important. So when we facilitate the discussions at the end of the scenarios, it's like, well, you use your deflection phrases. We videotape them. I want you to watch, and when you started talking to them about such and such, listen to your tone of voice and see if it sounded arrogant or sarcastic, whether you meant to or not, and we need to work on that for your next scenario. So, you know, that's a whole nother section that we do talk about. I'm glad you brought that up with the recruits on, you know, tone of voice. And the thing is, I think that, you know, I have the recruits, I have them fill out on their first day. I say, why did you choose this line of work? Write down like your top most important things. And number one on their list, and these are anonymous, so they could be truthful. They could say, I want to drive cars faster, or, I saw this cop show on TV, or closest I can get to Batman, or whatever one of them jokingly said on number 6. But it's always, you know, I want to help people that can't help themselves. I want to help people, you know, I'm there for people. I mean, if you think about victims, maybe the elderly, maybe the youth, you know, and you think about maybe these people need my help, and you're going to feel so good about helping people that maybe aren't able to help themselves. And I tell them some of my stories. They want to hear the stories where I had to fight somebody that reached for the gun, of course, and all that. But my stories that I tell them are the stories that didn't involve anything like that, but I was able to help somebody, and that made me feel so good that when I'm telling my stories, it gives me goosebumps. So we're really getting recruit officers and police officers that really their main goal is to help people, and I truly believe that. And I know in an interview they're all going to say it, right? I mean, that's a given. But this is anonymously, just for records that I'm keeping for future, statistics and things like that. And so I think with that right mindset, and keep in mind, not everybody makes it through the academy, and not everybody makes it through the field training program, and not everybody makes it through probation, because if they aren't that person, it's going to show up at one of those phases. I've removed people from the academy for behavior or integrity or issues like that, and you've lost people in the field training program that it just wasn't for them for whatever reason, and probation, they may not make probation, or they may realize themselves it's not for them. But there's stages you go through too. It's not just the academy. So does that answer your question? Or?
And the reason I said that it was because of the example what Scott was bringing out, the languages, because sometimes
Yes.
you may not be able to say the same language, but I think everyone can sense someone caring at some point.
Yeah, I think so
I
too.
saw an example of someone on a train one time where this lady got on and she was just freezing cold, didn't have anyone, but this lady just offered her to come and huddle under the blanket, no language, no words or anything.
Right.
And she knew
Yeah.
just from that was somebody caring, and she felt safe enough to share
Is that on like a
blanket.
video I can show my recruits? I like those kinds of stories. So.
This is my eyes.
Oh, your eyes. Okay.
watching.
You
Yeah.
didn't get your camera out. And
No.
Okay.
Ooh, I wouldn't do that. To
Okay. No, that's right.
No.
Sorry. Eavesdropping laws and stuff.
Oh, well, because of that, I just
So.
invade.
Anybody have anything?
Do all the departments embrace this strategy in the area?
I'd have to be honest and say I don't know. I do know that every administrator of department wants this culture. I would say there's some departments, and I would say it's maybe a few of the very extremely large departments that's harder to change the culture of policing than it would be sizes like Champaign and Urbana and Danville and Decatur, and that are good-sized departments, but the culture of a department sometimes takes the evolution of people retiring and new people coming in. That's why I think we're evolving, and I'm not going to say we're there yet. I'm not going to say, oh, every officer does exactly what I said today. I know better than that. We all know better than that. I'm not going to lie to you, but at the same time, I just, and of course you got to realize I'm Mr. Optimistic, positive guy to the point where it drives people crazy, but I really feel like things are getting better and better and better all the time. And they're being held accountable by their administrators. And I think groups like this are awesome. And I think that, these types of things, if more cities did like Urbana's doing, and they had true leadership like you guys have with Chief Conley, and I know that he hates it when I say great things about him, but he is one of the most respected, chiefs in the state, actually, so. I know you hate that when I talk.
Well, we know he works pretty hard, that's for sure.
Yeah, he's about 110 miles an hour all the time, we know that.
Everything you said also fits into the education field. I can remember and look at reasons as I was going through scenarios when I was working, and like, okay, that's why. And the kids will tell you when you're talking to them and ask them, why did you do what so-and-so said? Because she respected me, because she told me why she wanted me to do that.
Yeah.
It's only those individuals maybe who are sometimes still can't get away from the way it used to be, or
Yes.
maybe like, even in my case, I never would have asked my mother why. Why come you want me to do that?
Right.
My kids can ask me why now.
Right. And you'll
that
explain-
doesn't mean, I will explain, but
Right.
at the same time,
But at the
that
same
doesn't
time-
mean my mother was a bad parent.
No, yeah.
But-
So I think, yeah, you're talking about not just police, but in general, I think things
It fits in general.
things are changing. Yeah, that's a good point.
Thank you.
Well, thanks for having me.
I think I would be remiss, I have to mention one thing. First of all, we have to mention that Mayor Prussing played a pretty big role in making sure the Police Institute stuck around. And
Yes.
we're certainly glad that you're heading that up and that we still have it here. But I think, I certainly thought that it was an important part of our community, and I'm glad it's here and has been here these many years, and that we were able to save it.
Yes, and I will re-emphasize that Mayor Prussing was a big part of keeping us open, and she was awesome. and she did a lot of powerful, courageous things. I think we know that she's not afraid to say what the right thing is to say. Do you guys agree with that? So I think, yes, she was very instrumental, very big part of that. And yes, I appreciate her very much, as all law enforcement across the state that appreciate our training. So.
And I think that Chief Conley probably convinced her about the importance of the first training.
And Chief Conley's right there by my side every time I need him. Just a phone call away or a email away. So.
Michael, thank you very much. Thanks for coming.
All right, thank you.
Very interesting presentation. Chief, thanks for bringing them along.
Thank you. Good. Thumb drive.
We'll move along. Old business annual report, review and approval.
So we've talked about the annual report in the meeting earlier this year. We did not actually meet in April. And so the changes that were suggested in the January meeting have been made. The section has been enlarged. We actually subsequently asked for comments, and we made a few other adjustments based upon those comments. We have copies of the annual report, of the draft annual report here. So I guess I'm bringing it to you to ask, do you want to formally approve it? I know we've discussed this in the past. And just, if you'd like, you can formally approve it, or we can just present it before council. I just wanted to make sure I got it in front of you, at least the agenda item.
What's the pleasure of the board? I think I'd like to have the board look at it with changes before we give it the okay. I'm trying to think how we can do this and still get done what we need to get done in terms of
Right. We have copies here for everyone. And I want to remind everyone, we sent out sort of this version
right.
a few months ago.
And then there were some changes made, right?
Right, but even after that, we sent the final version out. So that version has been seen by everyone. And everyone, I believe, has had a chance to comment on it, and we subsequently received no comments.
I reviewed, and actually the only comment I had was actually on my name, where it says, as far as special education, I would probably now put retired educator, but I can go ahead and do that. And I remember talking to Tony about that, and I just hadn't gotten it into him. But
Todd, what's our? I mean, I assume you want to get to this to the council as soon as we can. Do you, or what's?
Yeah, at some point it should be presented to the council, but other than that, I don't think there's any rush or imperative on it.
I would like to have us take one more look at this. It's a draft copy. I know you've sent it to us. I think that probably the fact that we now have it gives a little bit more immediacy than just one more email. And I would like to have us look at that. And with a little bit more critical eye. Let me ask the committee, would we want to, I don't know if there is such a way as conditionally approve this pending any changes that we might submit, or would you rather hold off? Dan, I always defer to you because you're our wordsmith and chief proofreader.
But those, of course, would not be any substantive suggestions. So, you know, I'm fine with giving conditional approval on all of us responding with an email and saying.
Can we do that? We can do anything we want, right?
Yeah, you can
No,
do
I'm
that.
I'm just joking. Are you okay with that? That way it's a little bit more immediate. We look at it. And if we've got some changes, we
I mean, I'd make a motion to approve it right now. Anybody else wanted to second it? Okay, so I'll make a motion to approve the 2012 annual report.
Second.
I think James did it.
Okay.
I've looked at it twice. I'm
That's
not going
fine.
to look at it again. I'll be honest with you.
Is there any discussion?
I mean, that was it, because I looked at it and I know I had not sent that in, and if I even did that tonight, I'd go home and whip that out, but I wouldn't go back through it probably.
We'll
wouldn't
assume
if I
that we
did.
can make some clerical corrections if we spot those, just so long as, and I'm assuming that what we're really approving is the substantive nature of the report. And if there's clerical corrections that need to be done, we can give them to Todd and Tony and have them addressed. So, all in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Pose same sign. Okay. Annual report is reviewed and approved, and I think, Tony, I'd just like to make note that it's been reviewed twice before, so we didn't exactly buzz through this thing tonight. Okay. Todd, you want to talk about ride-alongs?
Sure, but there is a matter under new business B, which is outreach discussion.
Oh.
Is it okay if I address that
Yes,
at
go
this
ahead. I'm
point?
sorry, I missed that, yeah.
So, after doing some very careful review of sort of where my office is using our resources and how our resources are best used, one of the things I wanted to bring, or suggestion that I wanted to bring before the board, and I think we've talked about this in the past, and I'm not exactly sure what happened, would be the formation of some standing committee to meet perhaps even monthly on outreach activities. One of the things, after we had our meeting in January, there were several sort of attempts that we did with sort of reaching out to different community organizations. And part of the problem I am finding, at least, is that my office sort of juggles about 3 or 4 different functions. And so when there's an imperative function, like, and I know at one point I was in the middle of a conversation, an email conversation, trying to get a meeting sort of on the books, or at least get some proposed dates for meetings, and I ended up with a 700-page FOIA to redact. At the same time, I had a huge development on one of my HRO cases. And those types of contacts tend to, and before I looked up, 3 weeks had passed, I had been buried in this stuff, and I had passed a deadline. And I really would prefer that not happen again, and as much willpower as I can muster to try and make sure it doesn't happen again, I think it would be much more effective if we had some type of standing, regularly meeting committee that really just focused on outreach, so that my office could provide resources, we could find space for you, we could even make sure there's food available for the outreach activities or whatever you need. It's just to do that reaching out, to do that sort of retail sort of diplomacy with individual stakeholders to make sure that we're reaching out to everyone. Because at least at this point, the way that my office priorities have lined up, it has been getting sort of put on the back burner, and it should not be. And I would prefer to try to find a solution rather than continue to not do it as well as it should be done.
I sympathize with your situation, and I've often felt that we come up with great ideas and then we kind of dump it over here, and that we should probably take more responsibility for this if we can, to the extent that we can. And so I, for one, would volunteer to be on such a standing committee and meet once a month with whichever of my fellow board members could do that.
I volunteer. I will assist you, Diane. Help you with that. I got time.
I think that if we have for lack of a better term, coordinators as our fellow committee members, and then a phone call that says, I need you to be at such a place, can you make it? So that as a committee, you're not doing it all. You know, you're making sure that the contacts are made, the follow-ups are made, and we're assisting in being where we need to be. Not that you're not welcome to be there, but that we're spreading the responsibility among the committee versus just saying, not only will you work on this, but you have to do it all. I think this is what I'm trying to get at. So I think I would appreciate your volunteering with the rest of the committee's understanding that we're going to assist you in your efforts.
But what he's doing, you need someone to actually like kind of chair that or be responsible for
Right,
getting
and-
those calls out,
Yes,
and for taking
yes.
the lead part, or
And
coming
then-
in and meeting with you and saying, this is what we need to do, how do we do this?
Yes, and then once we have dates selected and things like that, we can get you space, resources, whatever you need. It's just having those ongoing conversations with different stakeholders in the community, specifically about the CPRB.
I know what I want to say and what I want to say, so I'm not saying this out loud, I'm talking to myself, okay? I've recently retired and I'm really thinking I need to get more involved and put a little more on my plate. You didn't hear that though, did you? Okay. I didn't say it.
I've been retired long enough to
But wherever I can help that on that. And I'm like you, Diane, I think we've said a lot, we come up with good ideas, but we haven't really moved it any further, so we need to do that.
be concerned about meeting.
Only if it's more than two of you.
Oh, is that what you, yeah, no, you need to worry about that.
Yeah.
So if there's just two of us,
You have to have a majority of a quorum.
but if there were three of us and, or if there were two of us and a alternate, so that if one of us couldn't meet, our alternate couldn't meet.
Or, like what Tom was saying, we reach out to our
yeah.
committee here and say, you know, we need some help, or maybe Diane's on a
So-
trip, or Ivy's on a trip, or someone's going somewhere, but we
could
can
meet
at
for
least get it.
lunch, or we could meet for coffee.
And I'd be happy to be there if you all want me to be there. And the one thing I would remind you is whenever you all are meeting with any other group, and there are going to be more than three of you, that will constitute an open meeting, and so we'll need to open it up to everyone. And
Right.
but those are things that we can help you work through in terms of reaching out and doing that initial contact and getting those dates.
And before
That's
any
really
of
what
that
we need
happened,
help
we
with.
would definitely let you know, or you'd be
Absolutely.
aware of that,
Yeah.
right?
Yes.
Okay. I would bet.
Yeah, I really appreciate Diane and Ivy offering to kind of help coordinate this, and I certainly enjoy going to the outreach events that we've had. I think that's a real important part of kind of pushing the message out to people. And you know, we're starting at a pretty low baseline. Heck, if we could do a couple before we have another annual report rolling out, you know, that'd be good. If we could get on a once a quarter, I think I can probably participate in several events like that, you know, a couple of hours at a church or whatever, if they were to happen, you know, once a quarter or so. So thank you, ladies.
Does that help, Todd? Is that what you were?
Absolutely. Thank you so much.
We'll exchange.
Sure. I'll meet you at Myers again. We just saw each other and said hi in Myers. No meeting. We just said hi.
You can have a meeting, it's okay.
We shop in the same places.
There you go. All right. Police ride-alongs,
Sure. I just wanted to remind everyone that there are 4 hours that are required each year of police ride-alongs. And actually, this is the chair also reminding everyone, and would encourage you to contact, I think in the staff report, I actually say who to contact.
You do.
Sergeant Jay Lotion.
Yeah.
So he's a great guy. Give him a call. You know what? We don't have the full number there. It's the start would be 384. There's a typo.
Okay.
2320.
384.
Or you can obviously email him. We'll fix that in the staff report. So that was that, and then I wanted the draft rule governing enforcement of prior conviction as a protected class. That's really a human relations commission. Function. They are currently holding public hearings to get input into that rule. If anyone would like a copy of that rule, basically the human relations ordinance makes prior convictions a protected class. And the way that we are currently enforcing that is if someone is on a job and they're fired for the job, or if they apply for a job and they're not given the job specifically because of their prior conviction, then they can challenge that adverse action, and basically the employer has to come forward with a reason why that the conditions or the circumstances of that prior conviction are substantially related to the job that they're seeking. But it is a very sort of retrospective type of enforcement. It is the only protected class where, for instance, you would never allow someone to ask someone's race on a job application and then make decisions based upon that individual's race, right? However, there are plenty of businesses in our community and around the country who ask about someone's prior conviction status, and much of that is very rational and reasonable based upon the restrictions, legal responsibilities of employers. However, my office is looking, the HRO portion of my office is looking for a way to increase the effectiveness of enforcement in that area while not creating a undue burden on local businesses. And so we have published a draft rule for comment. And I can, like I said before, it's on our website. We can make it available for anyone who's interested. There are several community stakeholders who have spoken in terms of advocacy. What we're really looking for at this point is technical evaluation and critique of the rule and the planned implementation of the rule. There are very specific sort of technical things that we have provided. For instance, one thing is the rule itself prohibits or would bar employers from putting that question on the job application. However, they would be able to run a criminal background check once they had made a contingent offer of employment. That is a huge difference from the way that things are done now. And what we need to know are what are the various, how will that impact businesses? How will that impact job seekers? That's the type of more technical, rather than, we want to advocate one side or the other. We're really looking for some of that technical guidance from people who are in the field and people who are doing job searches as to how the specific things that are laid out in the rule will impact them. So I just wanted to invite the board individually to take a look at that information, and if you have any questions or comments, please feel free to send them to me.
Yeah, Tony included a link to that document for us, and I downloaded it and started to read it. It's at least 14 pages long, maybe 12 or 14, and I kind of got bogged down, but I really want to thank Commissioner Resnick for bringing it up and stimulating the conversation. And I guess the first thought that I had as I started reading it, it's possible, especially for like the fourth-class felonies that we hear a lot about, that these are expunged, are somehow removed from record. If that happens, do people know it? I mean, in other words, if I'm applying for, let's say, entry-level service position, do I always know what my status is?
No. That's the simple question is no, but it's a very complex area. There are some things that people call expungement that really is not expungement. The number of cases that can be expunged are relatively very few. Okay. There are some other rehabilitative things that you can do, but the question is, at what level would that information be considered by prospective employers in making that determination? And the rule tries to address that. I apologize for the length of the memo. It's kind of a complex area with a lot of moving parts. And so what we tried to do is sort of explain why this protected class is pretty distinct from all the others.
I thought it was real clear. No, I'm not complaining that it was that long. I was just warning people who may want to download it and take a look at it that it's, there's a lot of good content there, and I think it's worthwhile to look through. So thanks for putting that up for us.
Anybody have anything else? I will entertain a motion to adjourn.
Motion to adjourn.
Is there a second? All in favor, say aye. We are adjourned. Thank you.